what are we gonna do? Keep dying. So having it, being able to read it in this manner slowly, and then also having the ability to discuss it and to share, and in the slow reading sessions that Jerry did, seeing other people's comments and seeing, okay, so we are on the same page in this thought process, and how we're viewing these things was much better for my brain. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this reread. I have to say, of the authors that I love, there are very few that I have read multiple times. And Octavia E. Butler is one of those, but I shied away from rereading this series because of the mental fuckitude that happened the first time I read it. So I am just ecstatic that I made it, that I'm still sane after making it, and we get to discuss it. Your turn.
Thank you. For those who are watching right now on ONYX Pages, I just want to apologize. I started the live stream. I just realized I started on another channel. So welcome to those of you who are watching over ONYX Pages right now. We are now streaming on the right YouTube channel. Okay. I loved Imago, and by loved, I don't mean that the story like gave me joy necessarily. I just loved what it caused me to think about. So I was really curious about how the series was going to end, and I was curious about whether we would see whether we would have a satisfying conclusion to this like own-collie / humanity issue, and whether like Lilith would end up, whether we would see more of Lilith, whether we would feel some peace for her, whether we would see any of the characters that we saw in Dawn, because I felt very connected to them, and so I didn't really know what was going to happen, but I'm really happy that we got the opportunity to see humanity through the lens of Jodis and its siblings and a smaller group of people. Like toward the end, when we see Kagayat and Nikanj and like everybody coming back, it just felt very cool, like a very closed circle in some ways. And I'm going all over the place because I just finished it this morning, but I loved the ending with the seed. I saw so many connections between this story and this series and other books that Octavia E. Butler has written, some that we've already read and some that are to come, and some themes that she keeps on forcing us to deal with, like can you make a community? Can human beings create a community that's collaborative, mutually respectful, non-hierarchical, generative, equitable in harsh circumstances or in the best circumstances, right? So we saw that in the Patternist series. We even saw that in Kindred. And, does time, does change, does technology, does that change this fundamental flaw that she keeps on returning us to in everything that she's written, which is this combination between hierarchy and intelligence? Now, I don't know that I agree with Octavia E. Butler that is the source of all evil as it pertains to humanity. I can think of a few 11 million others, but I do think that she comes back to that over and over. And this, I think, was the most like intimate examination of that. Like in this one, she takes us to like the urge to be this way, right? There's so much passion and restraint and tension and compulsion in Imago as compared to the other two books and perhaps the previous ones as well. So I just I really appreciated being taken through that landscape. As a theme, I found it really difficult to encounter in such a blunt way the ableism and from both the ONYX and also from humans. I know that Octavia Butler is very good at having us look at the worst parts of ourselves and to engage those parts of ourselves. And I think that that happened a lot in Imago, whether it be how Jodas was treated as, and a genetic anomaly by the Oankali, who had very limited outcomes for it, right? Like either exile here, exile there, exile there, but like you can't be with us because you're a danger, and you're a danger because you are a combination of genetic factors that we didn't expect or that we can't control, we don't know, right? So because your body and your genes work in a way that we don't understand, the safest thing for everybody is for you to be exiled. Like we've heard that over time in history. We're still seeing that now in terms of people who are living in a world that constructs them as disabled. And so that was something that I felt that I had to return to over and over and over again. And I struggled between thinking, did Octavia Butler get this wrong? Did she not do a good job in showing us an alternative here? Or did she do an excellent job of forcing us to sit for 3 whole books with this, like with ourselves? Is this book a mirror, and is what I'm uncomfortable with my own self, our own selves? So that continues to leave me uncomfortable, which is why you can read Octavia Butler a million times and come away with different things to think about and reflect on. And then the other theme that for me was really interesting was, the space was this thing that comes up in all of her books for me, which is when we're creating a new world, how are we constructing that world around sexual relationships, gender relationships, and around class and race? And here we saw a lot. We saw the lengths that humans will go to in order to reproduce, and the ways in which human beings will violate their own social norms and mores and most deeply held values in order to procreate and to continue on, to persist. I mean, she does say all life is tenacious, which she says in Imago, but she also says in a book we're about to read. So the tenacity of human beings, what does it drive human beings to do? I also found it interesting that in this 3rd book, she made some space for queerness in a way that it could stand alone without something sort of negative or punitive necessarily attached to it. So, for example, there's a scene in Imago where Jodas goes to the folks living up in the mountain, and he asks, like, is it only men that come out here and hunt? Or it asks, is it only men that come here and out here and hunt? Because if we stay on the outskirts and what happens when we meet up with men, what about the women, right? So again, operating on a binary. But when Jezusa says the women come out here to meet, I was like, is that what we're calling that? Okay, cool. But it was this kind of moment where I was just like, oh, there are women loving each other up in the woods. That's wonderful. But of course there would be, right? So I found that there were some moments like that in the story that I noticed. And I don't know if you noticed this, Tati, but there was so much humor here. Like when Jodas's sibling, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, but when they start getting sarcastic because they're like picking up on Tomas's humor, I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, so there's sort of a lot here. I don't identify as a member of the Latinx community, but I wonder what it might be like to be of that community and to read the way that Octavia E. Butler centered that community as the one community that survived and found a way to continue on and to hide itself successfully from the Oankali for centuries. I loved that in the setting, Octavia Butler gave us these beautiful ruins and these cliffs and these rivers and lush vegetation. And I, I just really enjoyed reading that and would have liked to see a little bit more. And I think that might be consistent with some of the history of the area that she was describing. So yeah, I'm clearly still thinking about it. I really enjoyed this this book. It was also like very satisfying in terms of her description of the transitions that Jodas was going through. I really loved, being introduced to a new being and seeing what its metamorphoses were going to be like. I loved the shape shifting. I loved the way she described Jodas, like, walking through the woods and then developing webbed feet and, deepening in color and turning into something that would look attractive to the people it was with. That raised a whole bunch of questions about what is our essential self, right? And the ways in which we shift in order to be palatable or attractive to other people. And do we lose ourselves when we do that? Or is that a part of the adaptations that we all engage in, right? So there was just so much. I'm going to stop talking. But I enjoyed Imago. I loved the series and I can't wait to discuss it with all of you. So those are my thoughts. So Ari, if you could share the presentation again. So as you know, one of the things that we do in addition to these live shows is that we have slow reading sessions. They're basically reading sprints that I do on the ONYX Pages channel. And we did 3 of those, one yesterday, one this past Friday, and then one the Friday before. And those are opportunities to just like read silently together and then stop every half an hour to just exchange thoughts. So you're welcome to join. We'll be doing the remaining books that we read in the series. And some of the comments are on the screen. So I dislike the Earth destruction as well. It seems they will make thousands of new ships to spread into the galaxy. Another participant said, it does seem likely like they could terraform Mars to take that life with them and leave Earth behind in a livable condition. This is when we were talking about, does the Oankali really need to destroy the Earth? Or is that something that they're just doing irresponsibly? Could they not leave the Earth intact enough so that humans can live there as well? And then there's so much to explore in Imago about ableism, the ableism of humanity, and the ableism of the Oankali. How can we approach these topics over 30 years after the novel was written? So those are some prompts in case you'd like to pick up any of those conversation threads in the facilitated discussion. So now is the time we are all waiting for, when we get to just jump in to the conversation in our small groups. We're going to do what we've done in the past. We are going to have 3 groups. There will be 2 breakout groups, one facilitated by Tati, one facilitated by Sherry, and Ari is going to be manually dividing all of us into groups. There's also going to be a group that will remain here with me in the main room, and we will be discussing as well. But the group that remains in the main room is going to be live streamed to YouTube. So that means that if you're with me, you will be recorded, you will be viewed, so that the people who are watching on YouTube can also participate through chats. So what I would ask is that if you end up in the YouTube group, in the main group with me, and you don't feel comfortable with being on camera, then just let Ari know and they'll move you into one of the other breakout rooms. Okay. Have I missed anything, Tati or Ari?
No, I think you got it all. I was going to pop in to remind you about if you didn't want to be in the YouTube space, and you got it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to do the manual movement now. And Ari, if you can just, take off the screen share, that would be great.
Oops, you heard that.
I did. It was It was great.
Totally fine. It's on brand. It is on brand. Totally fine.
Like yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. And so as we move in, Tati, I was wondering if there's anything, or Sherry, just from what we've said right now, if there's anything you wanted to share about it, or any exciting moments.
Sherry is thinking. I appreciate you mentioning about the changes that Jodis experiences as it is transitioning, and also like it's something that like you and I have talked about, how much I don't think about things because we read from very different parts. But one of the things that I noticed in reading this was, as easy as it was for me to think of Nikanj as it and Kaguyat as it was very difficult for me to move to the mindset of Jodis as it, because in my mind, as I was reading, knowing that Jodis was born with the intention to be male and Aora was born with the intention to be female, making that cognitive shift to it for both of them was a tad bit difficult. And I found that interesting. And I don't know if it was a hiccup with my brain, or if that was something that was intentional on the side of, I'm going to say it's intentional on the side of Octavia E. Butler, because she's a genius. So that's what we're going to say with that. But that was very interesting for me in my reading experience. To even in my notes, I have he that I have scratched out because I've in my just like free writing, I'm like, it's it. So
Yeah.
Sherry, got anything, boo?
I'll just say quickly that one of the things I have that stuck out to me a lot throughout the series and comes back again very loudly for me in Imago is this this notion of, well, first of all, the idea of consent, and then how much consenting are the humans actually doing in this process as the Oankali decides to share truths when they feel like they have to, and the ability to have fully informed consent and is less, if the consent isn't fully conformed consent, is it consent? So, yeah. And I know it seems like Ari has made the groups now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to do one and I'll do two?
Yes.
That works for you? Okay. Mm-hmm. Hop in, y'all have a good time.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we are, I think we're here. I'm just gonna wait a minute as people leave. All right. Okay. Welcome. We are here. We are the YouTube group. So I know ordinarily what I would ask when we were in actual breakout groups that are not being live streamed, I would ask you to turn on your videos so we could see you and have a better sort of face-to-face discussion. But we are on YouTube. So if you don't want to put your video on, that's absolutely 100% okay. All right. So the first thing that I'd like to do is just ask, what did you come here to say about the book? Because I don't want to guide your questions. I don't want to guide the discussion until everybody has an opportunity to just, So does anybody want to start with, what imprint was left on you from Imago and from the series? What did you come here that you have to just release into the space before we go into more directed questions?
Well, my camera's on, so I'll wait until everyone else gets theirs on too. I have to unpack COVID and how all of this was being filtered in my brain in response to what we're doing now with COVID, and thinking of how autonomy and consent, and even at one part, now that I'm rereading this, the fear of being sterilized if I'm healed, and having that connection of the fear of, having this vaccine that can help you, which, is there, but you have to have this agency and the right to choose and how that affects humanity. So I can go on and on with all the humanistic control and the drive to be human. And wow, I started thinking, would I be human or Nkali, or would I be, what would I choose? This is too much, but right now I'm filtering everything through COVID.
Yeah. And I think that it's inevitable, right? Like we are in the process of figuring out COVID and where we all are, right? We're reading this through a global pandemic, and some of Octavia Butler's work, often it's written in some form of apocalypse, right? Some form of significant change. So this is a great time, I think, to be reading about about these kinds of non-consensual change, right? That changes that might happen with us. So that makes complete sense. And that question about what would I have done? What would I have chosen? Would I have gone to Mars? Right? Would I have resisted and stayed on Earth? Would I have tried something new and paired with the ONYX? And, what would that have looked like? Right? So I think that those are really live questions. And I honestly don't know what my answer would be, because, and I also think it depends on who you are and what your experience right now with humanity has been. Like, I don't know that I'd go on the dusty rock of Mars with a bunch of people who wanted to go to build a new society. Like, my people didn't fare very well with colonizers then. Why would it feel like a good choice now? So, yeah. Others.
Good, I'm not alone. Good.
You were absolutely not alone. Others, what are your thoughts? Yvonne, Sharon, Thea, Dr. VP, Wankita. Make sure when you start speaking, you're unmuted so we can hear you. And those who are in the chat as well, please share your thoughts, and I'll just go to the chat and read your comments and include them in the discussion.
This is Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi. So I have to first say I didn't finish reading, but as far as I got, I guess I had kind of the same frustration I had with the first two books with the ONYX and their opinion of humans, and the shortcomings of humans. When I see them displaying the same shortcomings, the intolerance, the leaning towards almost a fascistic state in the way that they're practicing what I would call eugenics. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how it ends, and I don't want to stop anybody from talking about that, because I knew there'd be spoilers, but I just hope they redeem themselves in the end, because I find them quite deplorable.
Yeah. And if you're the same Sharon that I remember from past shows, I think I remember your voice and your face, actually. I think that we covered, I feel like there was a similar conversation when we talked about Doro in the Patternist series as well, but I'm not sure.
Yep, that's me.
That's you? Okay.
That's me.
Okay. I remember. See, it's building community. This makes me very happy. But it's this question about, consent and stuff. And there is squeamishness that I have for sure. Anytime the ONYX interact with the human beings, and they're just like, just stick around, inhale deeply, and soon you'll agree, right? Like,
that's right.
That doesn't change, right? And I think part of that is because, I do think that Octavia Butler was, as I read more about her life and who she was, and her challenges writing while living in poverty, and writing while facing the structural barriers to publications, to the field of science fiction. The more I read about her life, the more I understand why her protagonists were so constrained. I really do think that she was exploring how you can survive, thrive, create, God forbid, be happy, experience pleasure, even while in those circumstances. Like that seems to be a question in almost everything that I've read of hers so far. So yeah, it's uncomfortable, and I think in a lot of ways that's the point. I did find some satisfaction in how flummoxed the Owen Collie were by Jodis, because Jodis was just something, a mistake, right?
Yeah.
And the Owen Collie don't make mistakes because they can do everything, right? So I did get a little kind of petty pleasure from knowing that they didn't know what the hell was going on, and that this thing that they created was causing them to step back and feel some of the like fear and apprehension that they had been making humans feel for centuries after the war.
Yeah, I agree completely with what you're saying. And I think she was trying to tell us that there's not a better world, that we have to settle in to where we are, and as you're saying, figure out how to survive and make the best of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Others? Does anybody else want to share something that you came here with? It might even be a question that you wanted to ask, whether or not you have an answer for it. Okay, so I have a couple of questions that I'm curious about. So the first one is, what is the role of desire? And I mean desire in its broadest sense, right? Desire and compulsion in Imago. What did you think of how desire functioned in the story and in the series? And there are about 8 people watching in the chat. So please feel free to answer that question as well. I'm going to type it in the chat. So what's the function of desire and compulsion in Imago? And what did you think of its function in the story and in the series? How about Yvonne or Thea or Ishi? What did you think of desire and compulsion in the story?
I haven't read the story yet. I'm just here to get, I ordered the book and I'm just here to get some tape and to get some information on the book.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
well,
hoping that next time you have this session, I will be able to tip in more because I will have read the book by then.
okay. That's not a problem. Thanks for letting us know, Ishi. The next discussion is going to be on March 27th, and we're going to be talking about Parable of the Sower. So we space these out 2 months apart so that people around the world could get time to access the books and read them beforehand. But
Okay.
I mean,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's nice to have you. I mean, also if if we think about some of the common stories that we hear about alien abduction, right? Which is, we've got these common stories. There always is this overriding desire of the aliens to do something bad to humans, right? Like that's a trope that we see all the time. And I think Octavia Butler disturbs that a little bit by showing us the compulsion, like really getting into the compulsion, like what's the source of that? She even uses lines like, take me to your leader, which we can remember from 1940s, 50s, and 60s first contact stories. And she turns that over on its head, right? Because it begs the question of hierarchy, which she names as one of our biggest problems as humanity. So even if you have thoughts generally about, first contact stories with aliens and the role of desire, and in that would be interesting.
I thought it was interesting. Sorry, this is Taya. I thought it was interesting as far as when we talk about desire. In this one, it felt more like there wasn't natural desire, but all of it was kind of neurochemical, and they were only desirable. The Oankali, or the construct, like Jodas, was only desirable because he could heal and because he could put these chemicals or pheromones out there to make the humans want him. And that was the way that, he was sort of in control. But I kind of wish that there was more like show of how and or why he would be desirable in other ways, and not have it be so like, okay, they can't help but want him because, he emits this chemical.
Mm-hmm. What do folks think about that? Go ahead.
I would also say, when I think of desire, and you had me thinking on this because I went back to a page where possessiveness keeps coming up. And so, I can be as shallow and say, I desire eating that chocolate cake that I bought yesterday, or I desire this relationship, or I desire this hope for humanity. But there is this underlying possessiveness that Octavia just keeps bringing in. And it's shared by all of them, right? The humans, at one point, she says that humans' emotions are permanently locked into this sub-adulthood through the constructs, and that humans, desire and possess their partners. And the aliens had the same feeling of humans and of each other in many ways, that you brought up that perfection. We are perfect. And so I could not have made this mistake. So this desire and possessiveness is also this search in some ways for perfection. And so you're kind of doomed to fail in that, because do we ever fully get what we desire, or are we somewhat always short of it?
Do we ever really get what we desire, or are we always somewhat short of it? And I love that. I repeat those words because it reminds me of something that the Oankali said over and over and over again across the series, which was that it was basically the equivalent of he was saying no, but everything else about him was saying yes. We've heard that before. We've heard that before in scenarios involving sexual violence. And so I couldn't hear that without thinking about sexual violence, right? And so, whether in the 80s Octavia Butler was trying to get us to think about that, I don't know, but I certainly did. And I also thought about, like, how do we express our desires, and how do we express the things we want? And what does it mean for these aliens who have the ability to tap into our breathing, our heart rate, our sweat, and all of those things in our reading? Like, there's one point in the book where I think it's Jodas who says, like, humans think that we can read minds, but we're actually reading humans, right? We're reading every single ways that your bodies tell us things. And there's such a dissonance often between what's in your mind and what comes out of your mouth, and what your body is telling us you want and what comes out of your mouth, which is really problematic from a trauma-informed perspective, for sure. Because we know the body doesn't always reflect what is right for us or what our desires are. So I think that there is something there to certainly explore. And like, in addition to that, in another way, it got me thinking about like the like hatred, right? So there's this one point where I think it's the elder of the community, and this is before he inhaled all the pheromones, but the elder was like, he was like, Jodas was saying something like, I heard him he was looking at me with disgust, but everything else about, he wanted to be convincing, right? That he was disgusted by me, but I could see fascination, curiosity, and I think they said also desire or something as well. It said desire, excuse me. And I thought that was really interesting. And we've seen that like throughout at different stages of being chemically manipulated by the Oankali. I just want to pull up a couple of things that are in the chat here. So Pretty Brown Eye Reader says in the YouTube chat, this one, meaning the book Imago, felt like it was more sexual, wanting to be desired and intimate. Maybe sexual is not the correct word, but I was feeling like the wording was close to romance. Yeah, and there was this one, I agree, Pretty Brown Reader, and there was this one point where Lilith says to Jodas, maybe they love you, right? And Jodas is like, it's pheromones. And then Lilith says, maybe it started out as pheromones, but I think this is love, right? And I thought that was really interesting because the word love was used in this book way more than in past ones in the series, from my recollection. I'm talking a lot, so others, please, please, please jump in. How about Yvonne? How about JJ? In the chat, we've got Dr. VP, like it or not, we humans and they, OAN, are electromagnetic biochemical entities. That's what bodies are. Desire is a chemical phenom. It could not be otherwise in this existence. Agreed. When you were speaking, Regina, I was thinking about this concept of falling in love. And and also like these other moments in life where we have like more of a particular chemical. Is it oxytocin? It's oxytocin, I think, that gets developed when you're
oxytocin.
Yeah, that gets developed when you're in love, or I don't know, get a new puppy, I don't know what it is, but there's
your baby and all that, it comes out.
Right. And so if you get more of that and more of that and more of that, you want more of that, right? And that does translate into wanting to be more, with that person or in that environment more often because you want more of that. And so I don't know how off the Oankali are. Is it that they're just more honest about the fact that this is it's happening and they can control that? But couldn't you control that by putting on a really nice outfit and showing up looking like what somebody you're interested in wants you to look like, and flirting and texting and telling them how hot they are? Like, don't we do that? Can't we do that too? So
absolutely. And when I heard you say you want more and more of that, right? Yeah. Isn't that also that fine line of addiction, right? That when we start to think of not just a craving or a desire, it's also, when does the Oankali know that if we don't separate that, humans will once again destroy themselves because it becomes this addiction. Mm-hmm. They don't even want us to enjoy our partner. They want us to only enjoy our partner sexually through them, right? Through the construct. So it's almost this tampering down of, wait a minute, desire can get out of control to this addictive level. So there's this constant suppression. Mm-hmm. Ooh, I got to unpack this one. Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah. There's a lot there. That's why I wanted to sort of ask about desire and pleasure and the ways in which the Oankali are expert at using that to manipulate human beings. in this story and in the series altogether. Ari, do you know how much time we have left? Because there was another theme I wanted to pick up.
We've got about 25 minutes left.
Okay.
I did have a comment that I wanted to say about kind of this topic y'all are talking about. I didn't read the book. Also, my neighbor's dog is loud. But what you're talking about around desire, it reminds me of this podcast I was listening to. It might have been Hidden Brain. Honestly, I don't remember, but they were having this conversation around like happiness and like what dictates like how we experience happiness. And it's really interesting that like, I think both you and Jerry and Regina were talking about like these experiences where like we have the thing that we want and then we want more of it. And in the podcast, they talk a lot about how like that was connected to like our inability to like actually experience the present moment. And so they gave this example of like a professor who's like, all they want is like to be tenured, right? And then like the day they find out they're tenured is like an amazing day, right? But then they actually have to experience what it is like to be tenured. And we often like fantasize about, we as in like humans often fantasize about like what this thing that we want, but not actually like what comes with the thing. So like you have tenure, but now what is all of the, the research and the papers and the writing and the grading and all these other things that go with it. And I feel like that's kind of a theme that you all are talking around and thinking about right now. So wanted to add that in. And yeah, we've got 24 minutes now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. If I may, I'd like to transition to talking about what I'm going to term the social construction of disability, which one way to explain that is I'm in Ontario, and in human rights law in Ontario and in Canada, there's an adoption of this concept called the social construction of disability, which is the recognition that the world has been created in order to, the way that the world has been created has resulted in something that we call disability, right? So we create the world so that it works for people who can see with their eyes. We create the world so that we create technology so that it works best for those who can hear, right? Like Zoom, right? Somebody asked today, do we have captioning? And I was like, we don't have captioning. I need to deal with that, right? So we create spaces, and then we say, if you aren't able to function like I can in this space, you are disabled, right? Not that I have created this exclusion, but you are disabled, and so now we need to figure out what to do about you. And so I think this particular story got me thinking about that in a lot of different ways. And I think that it was interesting to compare the Owen Colley's approach to, I'll call it disability, or at least Jodas's disability, right? Or which we, and I say that with a question mark, right? Because Jodas is able to do things that no other Owen Colley can. And Jodas's ability to do those things created an entire new possibility for the societies, right? So was that disabling, or was that actually enabling of a more equitable future, right? So it's framed as a disability, framed as a mistake, framed as an abnormality, right? Or an anomaly, until, sorry for those who haven't finished it, but until we see it happening somewhere else and we realize this actually isn't Nikanja's mistake, right? This is actually the Owen Colley doing what it does, right? Which is evolving into a state that actually creates more possibility, potentially, right? So we have that compared to the ways in which the human resistors, related to what they would call disability, right? So in the resistor village on the top of the mountains, we have people with large growths on their faces and spines that were bent, and all sorts of different things, which resulted in them physically harming each other, putting each other into exile, and all sorts of different things, right? So I was just wondering if we wanted to compare the Owain-Colley's treatment of those identified as different or differently able versus what Octavia E. Butler presents to us as human beings who are differently abled or different in human society.
So this is Sharon, and you know, I don't want to sound like I'm beating the same drum all the time, but I think this is a perfect example of the Owain-Colley and the humans really acting the same and not appreciating the different skills that people that have that are different from what we think they should be have to bring and offer to the community until they're forced to. And you know, it's a fascinating subject to me, and I can see why, you know, Octavia would have brought this into her writing, since she was challenged with a form of dyslexia herself. And look how she triumphed with that challenge, and so do her characters.
Yeah. I was interested in the concept of healing. I think that because there was so much ableism in human society, the Owain-Colley were able to manipulate humans with the promise of healing, right? You don't want to live the rest of your life deformed, so let us heal you. Don't you want to see out of both eyes? Don't you want to hear out of both ears? That would not be as persuasive if humans were not ableist, right? Because the answer would be, I'm well. I'm well. My body works.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm good. Get your little sensory arms off me, right? We're all good. But the Owain-Colley come into this village and they see, oh, so this is what you do, right? This is what you do to people who you see as disabled. So this allows us now to come and manipulate and to to use your own forms of oppression, which we also share, right? Against you. And so, and again, which links for me to that theme of hierarchy and intelligence, right?
Right.
Because if you're not hierarchical, then take me to your leader makes no sense, right? You can't, well, you're looking at us, right? Don't you want to be like this? Well, we're all living an equitable existence together.
Right. And we certainly see that resistance to so-called healing in the deaf community in particular. Yes. Among people considered to be disabled.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know, for those of you who are familiar with Christian theology, I also found it interesting when we saw Jodis in this little home with his two mates, welcoming the sick, the ailing, into the cave to heal them, and they left, you know, and it reminded me of those images of faith healers and of course the Jesus Christ, some of the stories of Jesus healing the sick. I come from a Catholic background, and there's a lot. I actually wrote down in the book that I need to revisit. I'm no longer a Christian, but I need to revisit the ways in which ableism was sung and prayed into me. like the songs, like I was thinking about hymns about healing the sick, and you know having a log in your eye, and like all sorts of different things that were about disability being something that you ought to be free from. And this is the first time I actually encountered that in my own sort of thinking, looking back at my past. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think Octavia Butler has constantly put a lot of, Easter eggs, if I might, Christian Easter eggs in her writing. Like when there's this one joke where it sounds something like, despite her name, Jezusa wasn't very forgiving. Like there's this little like, and then she's called a Judas her and Tomas are called Judases. So there's a lot of sort of Christianity there as per usual.
And she is fascinating how she works various things into her writing that you don't know who's going to pick it up and who's not. That's one of the fun things.
So go ahead.
Oh, I thought one of the other interesting dynamics when we talk about the healing is the mental healing versus physical healing. And I thought it was interesting. I can't remember the exact part of the book, but Lilith was confronting Jodas about healing someone, and he was like, they're healed. And she was kind of hinting at, no, they're not really. And it seemed like, she was saying, even if you heal them physically, you need to take more care in paying attention to their mental healing or well-being. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. VP says in the Zoom chat, what about pain, suffering? Healing also means removing, eliminating suffering. Yeah.
Yeah, I was responding to that too. I thought for myself, I don't want to eliminate pain because those are usually moments of growth. Not all pain has been good, but there's some. And that's the part where that autonomy comes in, that agency and that competence of knowing I have the right to choose that. And then I start falling in the slippery slope of fertility. So, for choosing to have fertility treatments is something that I never thought of too negatively. And maybe Octavia didn't mean this, but now it has me thinking of are we going to construct a perfect society? And I know that is not true. I know that. But I do wonder, you have to have a trusting society, an equitable, inclusive society that doesn't other others in order to believe that there is not a slippery slope with even that fertility piece, which is a form of healing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy, it's only one step away to be like, well, what kind of genetic combination of baby do you want and not want? Because we can help you manage that, right? And that is a part of that, experience. And so it is very interesting. I mean, I don't know if we would have been able to easily make that connection in 1988, but I certainly know that in 2022, there's so much, like, trace your ancestry, right? Like, spit in the thing and we'll tell you where you're from, right? Like we're closer to some of the things that she imagined in 2022, now that we're in 2022, for sure.
Yeah, and if you've ever been around a kid who is 5 and has seen a world that oppresses the Black and brown, there is a child that has asked me, well, I don't want to be Black anymore. And would we create a society that sees that as less than, and we slowly, with the Onkali, have like woven that out?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because in choosing Lilith, a Black woman with natural hair, and they describe her afro in a really beautiful way in the book as well, they seem to not react to race in quite the same way that humans do. They notice phenotypical differences and racial differences and language and all of those things. But it seems like Octavia Butler made a point of not having the aliens be preoccupied by race to the extent that we were, so that even in Dawn, we see the Oankali being like, oh, I noticed, we noticed that those of darker hue are treated differently, and that men are selected as the natural leaders when they're actually the most prone to violence. It doesn't make quite sense. Like, they're sort of puzzling out what the strange things that we do as humans in order to maintain, order. I want to pick up on something because I know that we have one task. I'll mention the task and then I have a question. So the task is each of the facilitators are going to try and have our group sort of decide on one lesson arising from the Xenogenesis series or from Lilith's brood. So there are a million, but if there might be one that we could share with a large group, just maybe think about that. And so if you're listening, even if you haven't read it, please feel free to put in the chat, a lesson or a theme or one thing that we could share with a larger group arising from our conversation and or our reading of Imago. And then Pretty Brown Eye Reader on the YouTube chat says, another subject I found interesting was suicide, the desire to not want to live. And I recognize that many of our discussions are and can be quite triggering. And so, of course, just be mindful. We all have different experiences with, suicide or talking about suicide or suicide in the lives of people around us and our families and our communities. So just a note to be sensitive about that. There was, I think our closest connection to suicide and the desire to take one's life or to give up on living. It comes up in the latter, I think the third quarter of the book with Jodas's sibling, who really physically starts to change into an unrecognizable form and to desire water. And I really enjoyed how Octavia E. Butler got us to think about that, about the state of that character, by not necessarily wanting to not live, but not knowing how it could have a continued existence without connection, right? And that, like, the loneliness being so significant that the body starts to take on a different shape, become unrecognizable, lose certain faculties, and then only to be reformed, reshaped once surrounded by love and trusting people, and then finally with connection through mating. And I was just really moved by watching that character go through that and thought, well, that's a literal translation for, depression and loneliness and so on, which I think a lot of us are experiencing in different ways because of the prolonged global pandemic. And Taya says it also comes up with Thomas earlier in the book. Yes, it does. It does. Yeah, thank you for that reminder where we hear that with Thomas. I think that's actually where it comes up first, I think, because we learned about Thomas. How did Thomas break his leg? By jumping off a cliff, right? Because the future, so we have a human character, and then we have an Ulay construct character, both dealing with not being able to perceive an existence beyond their current circumstances. I'm talking a lot. I'm going to stop. I was wondering if somebody wants to read what Dr. VP has put in the chat.
Yeah, I got you. Dr. VP says the essential meaning, or their overall thematic takeaway is that the essential meaning, role of touch, physical contact, and being embodied. So how is embodiment navigated with and without intimate, caring touch in one's life?
I like that. Thanks for that, Dr. VP. So as I know we have about, 5 or 6 minutes left, 5 minutes left. So I'd like to just continue to open the floor. Are there any last thoughts or even questions you want to leave with us as we prepare to go back into the main room? Even if you haven't read the book, or you haven't spoken yet in our discussion, is there anything you'd like to leave with? And perhaps I might phrase it and frame it as a question. Are you seeing the story in a different way after having had this conversation in the breakout group, or is there something that you want to take with you to sort of explore and reflect on in the future? So Regina says, caring touch during this pandemic has been so important. Yeah, and then followed by Dr. VP, and when it's absent. Yeah, yeah. Anyone else? So do you want to read what you wrote, Regina?
I didn't want to take up too much air.
Okay.
I think I know we are an adaptable species. I know that now, reading this the third time in life, Lilith, she would have done something different. I know now that Mars, before this conversation, I probably would not have gone to Mars, but now I'm thinking I may go there and know that I would survive because we're adaptable. I think we're gonna make it. We're gonna push through. So I'll see you in Mars.
I don't know that'd go. I don't
You
know.
haven't decided?
I think I would say with the Oankali, and I think part of that is because I'm deeply curious. I'm a deeply curious person. Would you say so, Tony? Oh, you okay. So my wife is like right there being like, indeed. So I'm just like a deeply curious person, and I think I would go with the Oankali just to see if I could like see other galaxies. If my life span got tripled or quadrupled and I could like explore different species and stuff, I'd be gonzo. I'd be like, where's the ship? Give me those filaments. I'm good. So yeah, I think I would. All right. So I think we have like a minute or two left. And okay, so folks are going to be coming back into the main space. So are we good with, I'd like to adopt Dr. VP's message as our parting thought. And I would like to thank you all for participating by speaking, by listening, by typing questions and thoughts into the chat, either on YouTube or in our small group. And also just by saying, you know what, I just want to be here as a part of the community and listen. This is another way to enter into Octavia Butler's work. I know for me that, hi, Emery. Emery's in the YouTube chat saying, hey, y'all, LOL, where's the ship? So Yeah, when I first started reading Octavia E. Butler, I found it confusing. I was very, very new to speculative fiction and science fiction. I read a lot of her work in the 90s and didn't know what I was reading. I'd never encountered anything like it, and was quite confused, very moved, but very confused through a lot of it. So this slow read is helping me because I'm not confused as much anymore. But the slow read is really helping me to see what she was trying to do in some places, and really appreciate how ahead of her time she was. Because at the time that she wrote this, if you look at other science fiction novels written in the 80s, and first contact stories in the 80s, they weren't dealing with people of color unless the color was green. They weren't questioning, like there's that moment on the top of the mountain where Jodas is returning, and it overhears a domestic dispute. So overhears somebody beating their mate and a woman screaming. And Octavia E. But like, when was the last time you read a book about alien abduction that actually put into the frame domestic violence, that a human doing that to another human, right? Like she did not allow us to step away from our own horrific behaviors. And she didn't put all of that burden on aliens. She showed us that within ourselves. And I think that's a really powerful gift that she continues to give us. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. So we have just completed our small group discussions, and I hope that they were really fruitful. What we usually do at this point is do a little reflection back. So Tatiana, Sherry, and I will share one sort of lesson or theme arising from our conversations in the small groups so that we can hear them aloud before we move on. I'll start with our group. So the thematic takeaway for our group, and this was prepared by Dr. VP, our Dr. VP, who is the voice behind the first chapter of Imago, which you would have received over email. So Dr. VP says the essential meaning, the role of touch and physical contact in being embodied, and how this embodiment is navigated with, and how without intimate and caring touch, can we persist in life, right? So without that, what does it mean to be without that? So that was one of the pieces that we sort of ended with, and we talked about reading this during the we talked about reading this during the pandemic, and I thought that was really powerful. Tati or Sherry?
I was like, oh yeah, I need to talk. We talked about a lot, and I'm telling you, there was a lot. That's really all that I have. We shared a lot of thoughts around the ONCOLI over the series, and the changes that we saw in the humans or not, and the changes that we saw in the ONCOLI or not. I spent a lot of time thinking about the passage of time during this book, and where we ended up, and then also thinking about, now that Jodas has planted his seed. That sounds really, really okay.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. like the fate of Earth after whatever time frame Lo is intended to leave, because now Jodis has an Earth baby. And the need to, what will Earth be after Lo leaves, because Jodis is building a thing. That's what's sticking out of my head. And Kirk made the comment in our chat about Octavia Butler creating and writing Afrofuturism before Afrofuturism was a thing. And that made me feel good, because yes. Because yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And agency and entrapment. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Agency and entrapment. The humans' agency, and then the humans being entrapped by the Oankali, by the Uloi, especially in this book with Jodis, Tomas, and Jesusa, and Jesusa's reticence, and finding out that, and then finding out you can't go nowhere. Yeah.
Okay. Sherry?
If I was Jesusa, I would have been pissed too. He could have told her. But I just want to say my group was great. Thank you all for being very participatory, and we talked about a lot of stuff. We did try to figure out what we want to concentrate on for this year back. So the themes in our conversation and the repeated points that people were making pretty much came down to this conflict between chaos and control, and how that is messy, and how you cannot control for everything, even though the Oankali really try to. But you have humans in this equation, and it's going to be chaos, and that's why you're attracted to us, and it's going to happen, and it's going to be messy, and as you can't, especially when it involves change, and everything's constantly changing, and that change is not always going to be something you can control. It's going to be chaotic. So, and there were some really good points about how the messy part, the mistakes, are actually what is binding these species together. It's what has attracted them to the humans in the first place, and it's what's bridging the gap between them in the embodiment of Jodis in Aor, and even Akin in Adulthood Rights.
Thank you. I hope that you all found that the small group discussions left you with more questions and more excitement and things to explore as we continue along the slow read. For those of you who have been here with us since from day one, and many of you are here and have been, I know that I'll say that I find that with every book, I am starting to see an overarching story that Octavia Butler was telling us. And that I'm really, really excited to see how these themes will get picked up in her next series, and particularly in the short stories where she sort of goes with some of these themes. So thanks very much. So Ari, if you could pull us back and put up the that, whatever it's called right now. Okay, thanks. And if you go to the next slide, I think we're doing the selfie. Okay, good. Well, then I'll ask you to stop screen sharing. So we're going to take a selfie right now. Ari's going to take it. So this is where we're going to ask you to turn on your videos, please. And if you could grab your book or your device or whatever you read on and put it up beside your face. We are going to take a number of selfies. And Ari, just let us know when you're taking them.
Okay. I am taking the first one now. And I'll take one more. I'm waiting on Juanita. Okay. Perfect. I got two. You want another one?
No, that's good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Everyone. All right. So I think our next part is a part that we always look forward to, which is the sound circle. And Tati, if you want to take it away.
Sure. We will now begin our sound circle. The way that this works is what you will do is you will choose a 3 to 5 sentence excerpt from the book that you either enjoyed or you thought was important. You will listen to others read. When there is a moment of silence, you can unmute and jump in. There's no explanation. There's no commentary as to why you chose what you chose. We're just sharing. And after you finish, someone else will pick up until Jerry says enough done.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to put us into gallery view. And I'll do something a little bit different this time too, which is if you are watching over on YouTube and you would like us to read an excerpt, maybe you can just put the page number and the version of, or maybe just type it into the chat. That's easier. We could read your sentence or whatever you put into the chat. All right, so the sound circle is open.
The word Uloi could not be translated directly into English because its meaning was as complex as Mikanja's scent. Treasured stranger, bridge, life trader, weaver, magnet. Magnet, my birth mother says.
Intelligence is relatively new to life on Earth, but your hierarchical tendencies are ancient. The new was too often put at the service of the old. It will be again. You're bright enough to learn to live on your new world, but you're so hierarchical, you'll destroy yourselves trying to dominate it and each other. You might last a long time, but in the end, you'll destroy yourselves.
Humans had evolved from hierarchical life, dominating and often killing other life. ONYX had evolved from acquisitive life, collecting and combining with other life. To kill was not simply wasteful to the ONYX, it was unacceptable. It was as unacceptable as slicing off their own healthy limbs.
She moaned and shared with me the pleasure of her body until I took my hand away and reluctantly detached from her. No, she said. I know. We'll sleep together tonight. I have to talk to you, though, and I wanted you to experience a little of that first. I wanted you to live in my skin for a while. She sat up and glanced at Tomas, who slept on. Is that what you do? She asked. She meant, was that all I did? For now, when I am an adult, I'll be able to do more. I'll heal you. I can't help it.
I could remember being inside her. I could remember when there was nothing in my universe except her. I found myself longing to touch her. I hadn't felt that before. I had never before been unable to touch her. Now I discovered a little of the human hunger to touch where I could not.
And only Uloi needed to heal. Males and females could learn to heal if they wanted to. Uloi had no choice. We exist to make the people and to unite them and to maintain them.
You want to be what you are. That's healthy and right for you. What we do about it is our decision, our responsibility, not yours.
Then the world around me seemed to flare brilliant white. I could no longer see beyond myself. All my senses turned inward as Nikon used both sensory hands to inject a rush of individual cells, each one a plan by which a whole living entity could be constructed. The cells went straight into my newly mature Yashi. The organ seemed to gulp and suckle the way I once had at my mother's breast.
The whole business was like Lilith's rounded black cloud of hair. Every strand seemed to go its own different way, bending, twisting, spiraling, angling. Yet together they formed a symmetrical, recognizable shape, and all were attached to the same head.
Yet she was weighted with guilt. One more betrayal of her own humankind for people who were not human or not altogether human. She spoke to Jesusa as a much older sister or as a same-sex parent. She advised her, listen to Jodas, I heard her say on one occasion. Listen carefully. It will tell you what it wants you to know. It won't lie to you, but it will withhold information.
Eventually, you and others like you will awaken dormant abilities in males and females. But you, as an Uloi, can have no dormant abilities. What will it mean to be complete? You'll be able to change yourself. What we can do from one generation to the next, changing our form, reverting to earlier forms or combinations of forms, you'll be able to do within yourself. Superficially, you may even be able to create new forms, new shells for camouflage. That's what we intended.
Stop running away from one another, Nakhon said. Find out what's comfortable for you. Do what your bodies tell you is right. This is a new relationship. You'll be finding the way for others as well as for yourselves.
Tomas stopped and looked at the three Oankali. Do you believe in spirits? We believe in life, Alhaja said. Life after death? Alhaja smoothed her tentacles briefly in agreement. When I'm dead, she said, I will nourish other life. But I mean, if I died on a lifeless world, a world that could sustain some form of life, if it were tenacious enough, organelles within each cell of my body would survive and evolve. In perhaps 1,000 million years, that world will be as full of life as this one.
A few of them signaled such eagerness that I knew they would be with us as soon as they could get a shuttle. Humans who wanted mates were rare enough and desirable enough to make people dare to face any danger they thought Aurora and I might present. And Aurora and I were interesting enough in our newness to seduce Oankali who needed Uloi mates.
And that man, Francisco, is he typical of the people here? He's one of the old ones, the first one I met. And he loves you. As you said once, pheromones. At first, no doubt, but now he loves you. Yes,
Jesucita, why are you afraid? Why aren't you, she said. She looked at me, then at him. This is an alien thing Jodas wants of us. Certainly it's an unchristian thing, an unhuman thing. It's the thing we've been taught against all our lives. How can we be accepting it or even considering it so easily?
Give yourself time. You're a new kind of being. There's never been anyone like you before. There's no flaw in you. You just need time to find out more about yourself.
And that's the sound circle. Thank you, everyone, once again. It's amazing how Octavia E. Butler's words, even when they are read asynchronistically, still tell a moving story. So thank you, everyone, for that. And Ari, if we can have the slideshow again. If you missed it, we sent you a beautiful gift from Dr. VP, which is Dr. VP reading the first chapter of Imago. We stand Dr. VP. Dr. VP is the people's narrator.
We stand Dr. VP hard.
We stand Dr. VP. So please check back. I'll leave a link in the thank you email that goes out to everyone so that you can return to that beautiful selection. And for those who haven't read Imago as yet, I know there are a few in my group, start with that. Listen to Dr. VP read the first chapter and then continue your reading. It's amazing. So thank you, Dr. VP. And thank you all for the sound circle. Let's talk about our next book.
All right. Our next book is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. I'm trying not to smile really, really hard. This is probably my favorite Octavia E. Butler story. So in 3 years, with the world descending into madness and anarchy, one woman begins a fateful journey towards a better future. Lauren Olamina and her family live in one of the only safe neighborhoods remaining on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Behind the walls of their defended enclave, Lauren's father, a preacher, and a handful of other citizens try to salvage what remains of a culture that has been destroyed by drugs, disease, war, and chronic water shortages. While her father tries to lead people on the righteous path, Lauren struggles with hyperempathy, a condition that makes her extraordinarily sensitive to the pain of others. When fire destroys their compound, Lauren's family is killed, and she is forced out into a world that is fraught with danger. With a handful of other refugees, Lauren must make her way north to safety, along the way conceiving a revolutionary idea that may mean salvation for all mankind. And that is the synopsis for Parable of the Sower. And our next live book chat will be Sunday, March 27th, 2022. Mark your calendar.
As you know, we are going to be reading together once again in March. So just to explain the slow reading sessions. So these are sessions that take place over on my YouTube channel, ONYX Pages. And they are designed to create a community of readers. We usually read in the last 2 weeks before the live show. So we have 3 sessions. What happens in those sessions is that I divide up the time. So usually we'll have 2 or 3 reading sprints, and that's where I'll set up a timer on my laptop and share the screen. And we each read silently in our own spaces for 30 minutes. Then we take a break and we chat with each other about what we've read, asking questions, making comments, squealing, freaking out, as the case may be. And then after our break, we go back and do reading sprints. So it's a great way, especially if you live in a time zone that makes it difficult for you to attend the live shows. It's also a great way. There are a lot of people who attend the reading sessions and read with us, but aren't able to actually make the live shows. They have to watch them afterwards. So I just like to invite you to participate. The way that you can find out the link for the slow reading live sessions is to make sure that you've got your ticket for Parable of the Sower, because the week of the live show of the slow reading sessions, I'll send out an email with all of the links for the live shows, and then you can just press them. You'll be taken to YouTube. You'll be in the chat, not on camera, unless you want to be with me, and we will read together. So it's a good way to read with others and to engage with me if you want to. So we're going to be doing that for Parable of the Sower in March. We would ask you to complete the survey. We're going to be sending an email out. It'll be a thank you email. It'll include a link to our survey. We do read the responses and shift things in accordance with what we've heard. So please, once you get a copy of the link in your email, please do complete the survey, give us our feedback, let us know how we can improve, and we will adjust as appropriate. You're welcome, Ishi. Thanks for joining. So there are a number of different ways that you can keep in touch with us. If you register, you'll get all of the emails sent to you automatically. Just to let you know, if you've registered and you no longer want to attend, just you can cancel the ticket at any time. You'll be prompted to choose a ticket level, either a free one. I think we've got a $5 level, a $10 level, and a $20 level if you'd like to make a donation to cover the costs of tech support and other such things. So please consider that. You can always cancel your old ticket and give a new one with the donation if you'd like. Please also subscribe to ONYX Pages and Musical Tati, and also Obsidian Texts and Tangents. The 3 of us here are all YouTubers, and we've got BookTube channels where we talk about books. You can learn more about what we do on our channels. Please make sure to follow on Twitter and on Instagram, the OEB Slow Read. That can connect you to content that we put up intermittently. But the main way to get information is through registering on Eventbrite. That's our primary mode for communicating with you. So before we go to our last slide, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Sherry for facilitating our small group. Thank you very much, Sherry. You are awesome. So we really appreciate that. And also thank you, Ari, for jumping in really quickly and being our tech person again today. And thank you to Dr. VP for your amazing voice, and to all of you for being a part of our OEB community. This is the first one of 2022. As you know, our slow read is going to be coming to an end at the end of this year. Our last slow read session is going to be November 2022, which means that in the live shows preceding, we will start asking you some questions about how you would like this to end. What is important to you? Do you want to commemorate the Octavia E. Butler slow read with a physical thing? Would you like us to have a dress up party? What would you like? So for those of us who have been here since September of 2020 reading together, think about what way you'd like us to close this space in honor of Octavia E. Butler and in honor of this journey that we've all been on together. We will be asking you for your feedback in subsequent live shows, but wanted to plant that seed right now. Is there anything else I'm missing, Tati?
No, I think you got it all.
Okay. Do you want to take that, Tati?
Sure. If you are not yet ready to go after we finish, I keep looking over here instead of looking at the camera, because all of your faces are over here. When we finish our live discussions, we do have a time that we call the lounge after the live show has ended, where we can sit and it's just an open discussion with those of us who are participating. It's not a guided discussion or anything. There may be a couple of questions that are asked, but it runs for about 15 minutes. If you would like to stay behind to participate in that, we will be here.
All right, Ari, if you can stop sharing. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for being here. See you soon. Have a wonderful Sunday. And for those who are live on YouTube, thank you very much for joining us once again. And for those who are watching the rewatch after the fact, we love you. Thank you for coming and being a part of this. And we hope that you found this fruitful, and have a great rest of your day. We're ending the live now, and we will stay on if anybody wants to just, debrief and such.